If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review for you guys. This time, we're going to be talking about something much more underground this time around, as this weekend, not a whole lot of big-time releases, mostly underground stuff, and we're doing two individual underground reviews this weekend, and then the other two, they'll be saved for a mini under-the-radar episode on Tuesday. But the first one I'm talking about, so I'm flipping the order of what albums I'm talking about this weekend. I'm talking about, first off, the newest effort from Calgary, Alberta, Canada's own Riot City with Electric Elite. So this is the sophomore album from this Canadian-based classic heavy metal / speed metal act that formed all the way back in 2011. They are currently on No Remorse Records, which that label is pretty hefty with like classic-oriented metal, like Eternal Champions on that label, which, by the way, I hope we get a new album from them in the future. But yeah, this is their second album, and I've heard the name come up in like other metal circles, and once I saw that they had a new album coming out, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna actually give this a listen and see how it stacks up. Album cover is pretty freaking cool with the Eye of the Jaguar laser beams shooting out, the Electric Elite, as it's called. So, whenever I'm listening to a band that's very much in that, like, late 70s, early 80s, new wave of British heavy metal, speed metal vibe, I look to hear some cool stuff, and, well, we got a lot of cool stuff on this album. I mean, overall, like, the production on this album feels very old school. Like, it feels like it was recorded in 1982. It really has that feel. But what's great about the production is the bass is audible and prominent throughout the album, kind of giving the album a little bit of that, like, Iron Maiden vibe. And there are a couple times on this album where I definitely hear traces of Iron Maiden. Now, the big band I've seen this band get compared to a lot is Judas Priest. And there are a few songs that kind of follow a little bit in the realm of Judas Priest. Tracks like Beyond the Star, Paris Nights, Lucky Diamond, and even Ghost of Reality. They all kind of have moments where it feels like something Judas Priest could have written, whether it be back in the 80s or hell, even today. And they're all very similar in the tempo, for the most part. Granted, a couple of the tracks kind of do change up things a little bit with more double bass drum work, and then other times it's just the standard galloping beat. But then you get other tracks, such as the opening track, Eye of the Jaguar, which is borderline speed metal, but even a little bit of thrash metal, kind of in the vein of a band like Agent Steel, and definitely in the vocals on this album, especially the high notes, made me think of Agent Steel quite a bit. Because if you listen to Agent Steel stuff from the 80s, you definitely get a lot of high register falsettos and high notes beyond repair. But even in like the vocal delivery here with Riot City, it feels very much Agent Steel inspired in terms of the delivery. I can't remember the vocalist from Agent Steel that I'm thinking of. Maybe you guys can help me in the comments below, because I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but I digress. But yeah, this track, it's got some thrashy bits, but it's still very much speed metal oriented. Tyrant, which is the third track of the album, feels a little bit more classic metal groove oriented, kind of like, again, Judas Priest, maybe even a little bit of like a more mid-tempo Black Sabbath song in terms of some of the riffs and and how the tempo is. But it just has that more over-the-top epicness that's laced throughout this entire album. Return of the Force, which is a really cool track that starts the second half of the album. This song feels a little bit punky, a little bit, like it's more in that galloping D beat that's just laced throughout the entire track. And it's really cool that they would change up the tempo a little bit instead of doing like the classic speed metal kind of gallop. They go into that more galloping D beat that feels like classic punk or early hardcore that would eventually inspire speed metal and new wave of British heavy metal. But yeah, it was a really cool song because I really liked the D beats going on throughout. And then we get to the final track, Severed Ties, which... Oh, I forgot to mention too that with Ghost of Reality, it starts off with this like more somber, clean beginning, but with more soulful vocals. And there's even a moment of straight up thrash at the end of that track. But back to the closer, Severed Ties, which is almost 10 minutes long, the longest track of the album. And like the first couple of minutes, it has this dark, clean beginning, and a story's being told with more of those soulful vocals. And I believe the vocalist, their new vocalist that's been in the band for a bit, Jordan Jacobs, he's the vocalist on this album. And he just showcases his range, like he does like the more low, soulful stuff up to the crazy highs. And with Severed Ties, he starts off with those more lower, soulful vocals. And then most of the song pretty much throughout revolves around that Iron Maiden-inspired gallop, which is really cool. And I just love how that gallop just flows perfectly throughout much of the song. Now, the lead work on this album is quite top-notch. There's a ton of ripping shred going on, but even in those ripping, shreddy solos, you get feel in them too, and some cool melodies just laced throughout all of the leads. And even a few times on this album, you get some harmonized leads, like especially in Severed Ties, you get this like really cool harmonized solo spot with both guitarists just showing off their chops and carrying forth the narrative of the song musically. Now, the riff writing on this album definitely, like I said, feels like something from the late 70s and early 80s, new wave of British heavy metal, speed metal. Like, there's some Judas Priest riffs, some Iron Maiden riffs, some Agent Steel riffs, even a Black Sabbath moment. It's just these riffs are classic throughout. And the vocals, like I said, soaring with high note heaven. And that's what I could say. Now, as far as the things I may not have liked about it, like I said, because they're more inspired by that like late 70s, early 80s sound, it will kind of feel a little bit derivative, and I've said this before with other albums this year, when it's playing to their influences, it's like just rubbing on that line of crossing the line of just sounding like a cover band or something, or a tribute act. It's just rubbing on that line because they are paying homage to classic stuff, and nothing wrong with that. And thankfully, they don't really ever cross that line to where it's like, oh, they're just ripping off this band and blah, blah, blah. No, they're just playing to their influences and doing it very well. And even though it might be a bit derivative in terms of the riffs and like the song structures, it still sounds like they were written today, which is something really cool that I enjoy from a lot of these classic heavy metal-oriented bands nowadays that feel like from that old period of the late 70s and early 80s. So with all that said, and of course it's just riffy fun, which is really important. So overall, this was a fun album to listen to, though I will say it's maybe not as strong as a couple of other more classic heavy metal inspired albums this year, but it's still a really good album. I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10. I enjoyed this album for what it is. It's 45 minutes, it's a bit lengthy, but it's only 8 tracks. It flows together really well, and it doesn't feel like it's 45 minutes. It actually feels like maybe 30, which definitely helps, especially in the sense that with how this album flows, it doesn't feel like it drags, which is good. But yeah, 8.5 out of 10 for Electric Elite by Riot City. But of course, those are just my thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts on this album? Let me know in the comments section below. And until next time, horns high.
Anything kind of mainstream at the time, if you could say so. Like you would get Slipknot, System of a Down,
Yes.
and loads of like Sum 41, Linkin Park, and all that kind of stuff.